Will you join me in a word of prayer? O Lord, may the words of my mouth, the meditations of our hearts, be acceptable in your sight. O Lord, our rock, our Redeemer. Amen. Today I want to talk to you about the virtue of Christian humility. Back in December, it occurs pretty much every December, right around Christmas. I think it was like the 27th. It was the Kennedy Center Honors. I always like catching that on PBS when it's on. The Kennedy Center always honors someone or a couple of someones who've made a lasting contribution to American culture through the performing arts. And this past December, I got a chance to watch a part of it, and they were honoring one of my favorite singer and songwriters, and that was James Taylor. When they're doing this honor ceremony, the person they're honoring is never down on stage. The person they're honoring is up in the balcony in the back. And down in the audience are all sorts of celebrities and dignitaries and even politicians. Usually at the Kennedy Center Honors, the President and First Lady are also there, and they're sitting up in the balcony along with the honorees. And you know who the honorees are because they're wearing these brightly colored, multicolored ribbons with medals on them. It's kind of like the Olympic medal ceremony. You see that at the Olympics, except they're wearing tuxedos and nice fancy dresses instead of sports uniforms. But they have that same kind of medals that they're wearing, and they're up in the back and they're being honored by this. But they're not on the podium like at an Olympic medal ceremony. They're in the balcony, and instead the people who are honoring them are down on the stage. And the people who honor them take time to pay tribute to them by talking about their achievements, but then also by singing some of their songs, playing some of their music, or even dancing some of their routines. And then when they get to the end of honoring one of these individuals, who happens to be the man or the woman of the hour for that year, everybody in the audience and those who are on stage joined together in a big sing-along of one of their most famous pieces of music. And so for James Taylor, it was How Sweet It Is to Be Loved by You. And everybody was singing it together. When it was done, they look up to the balcony and acknowledge the person they're honoring. And James Taylor just gave a very gracious nod and a gesture of humility. I was thinking about that because on this Sunday, when we celebrate the coming of Jesus into Jerusalem, he's swarmed by crowds and everybody is celebrating him. I have the feeling that there was some of that same type of appreciation and celebration going on among that crowd. That as Jesus is coming in, they're joining together in a sing-along too. It's blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And I think there's some of the same thing. They're celebrating him because he's made a contribution to the first century Hebrew culture of their time. And so they're singing it together, and while they're singing, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, they're also proclaiming him to be the next king of Israel. Only they're honoring him not with multicolored ribbons and medals, but instead with palm branches, and he's not up in the balcony, he's riding on a donkey, but some of the sentiments are still there. This is all playing out against the backdrop of a capital city that's being oppressed and is being controlled by a foreign power, and they're seeing Jesus as the icon of their nationalistic spirit. They're looking at Jesus and the contribution he's making to Jewish culture in their time as bringing back their cultural identity and giving them a sense of hope and who they could be, that God hasn't forgotten about them as a people or about their future. And so when they sang, Hosanna, save us now, there was as much ethnic and religious pride in that as there was spiritual fervor. And then Jesus receives it all in humility, in true humility. The response of Jesus to that crowd that was gathered together, whether it was the Jewish crowd or then later in chapter 12 when the Gentile crowd, the Greeks, are also clamoring and asking to see Jesus, is to say that his hour has come. It's time for him to be the man of the hour. Now Jesus has shrugged that off several times already in the gospel. The lesson we're looking at is from John chapter 12. Both the processional reading that we did earlier in this service and the part that was our gospel reading, both came from John chapter 12. But if we go back in the gospel to the very beginning, in John chapter 2, before Jesus has done any miracles, and Jesus is at a wedding at Cana, his mother Mary asks him about the problem they're having with running out of wine, and Jesus said to her, "My hour not yet come. And then there's a few chapters later, John chapter 7, when Jesus is with his earthly brothers. And they're telling him, well, you should go down to Judea, down around Jerusalem, and then dazzle people with all of your miracles. Jesus said to them, well, for you, any time is right, but my time has not yet come. Later in that chapter 7, Jesus did go down to Jerusalem and Judea, only he didn't go publicly like these brothers wanted him to do. He went privately and quietly. And John tells us he did that because his time had not yet come. And then in the next chapter 8, he says it again, his time had not yet come. But here we are in chapter 12 and verse 23, and in response to all the crowds and everything they're saying about him, Jesus said, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. And Jesus takes his place as the man of the hour with a sense of true humility. Not in the way of vainglory that they're seeking to celebrate him as the man of the hour, but instead he's going to be the man of the hour in the way of true humility. So right after saying that his time had come, Jesus went on to say in verse 24, truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Jesus is going to be the man of the hour. He's going to be glorified, not in the ways that they're seeking to glorify him, but he is going to be glorified by carrying out the purpose for which he was sent. And his purpose was to make a lasting contribution, but not just to the Jewish culture, but to every culture around the world, to make an eternal contribution to every culture through his death on the cross. And so the epistle lesson, the letter from a New Testament letter that was attached to our readings for today, was from Philippians chapter 2. And Sherry read it for us. And in Philippians chapter 2, verse 6, we hear all about how Jesus accepted this place as the man of the hour with true humility. And what did that mean for him? Verse 6 says, though he was in the form of God, he did not consider equality with God a thing to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking on the form of a servant, being found in the likeness of a man, and being made in human form, he humbled himself, become obedient to death, even death on a cross. Jesus accepted that place of being in the person of the hour, the man of the hour, with true humility. And true humility for him wasn't in the way of their vainglory. True humility for him was in the way of complete humiliation that would take place on the cross. Jesus said, unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies. And that's what was about to take place for him. And so he goes on in verse 32 to say, well, what should I say then? Well, Father, save me from this hour? No, but for this purpose I have come to this hour. Father, glorify your name. I'm sorry, that's verse 27. And then he continues in verse 32 to explain a little bit more about what that means. For when I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw all men to myself. And John tells us he said that to refer to the kind of death he was going to die. Not just what he would accomplish by his death, but the kind of death he was going to die. He's going to die on a cross. He's going to be lifted up from the earth. It's the way of true humility. I said today I was going to talk about the virtue of Christian humility. Well, this past winter I ran across an article that was in the New York Times magazine, and it was titled, saying I'm humble doesn't sound as humble as it used to, which I thought was a really intriguing title for an article. And so I looked at it, and I thought the content was even better than the title. So this is what, a little bit, I want to share with you that is said in that article. These days, humility isn't what it used to be. It may even be the opposite of what it used to be. We're living in very humbling times. People are humbled all over the place. And lately, it's pro forma, possibly even mandatory for politicians, athletes, celebrities, public figures to vocally and vigorously be humbled by every honor awarded, by prize won, by a job offered, a record broken, a pound lost, a shout-out received. In the present vernacular, people are humbled by things that would make them look good. A soap opera actress is humbled by the outpouring of love from her fans. Comedians are humbled by big laughs. Yoga practitioners are humbled by achieving difficult poses. And athletes are humbled by a good day on the field. Christmas volunteers are humbled by their own generosity and holiday spirit. And yet none of these people sound very humbled at all. On the contrary, they all seem pretty proud of themselves, hashtagging their humility to advertise their own status and success and sprightliness and generosity and moral superiority and luck. When did humility get so cocky and vainglorious. Many uses of the word smack of sanctimony and Christian piety, which is no wonder. Humility is, after all, a Christian virtue. Whew. As I read that, I thought, wow, she hit the mark on what we in 21st century America kind of think about humility. But then she compared that to a false expression of humility that is often seen among Christians, and then heralded as virtue. And you know what? Even though it hurts to admit it, I think maybe she was even right about that, too. See, how often does our attempt at humility really flow from a Christ-like humility? And how often is it a veiled expression of vainglory, similar to what we read about in that article? So let's talk about what Jesus meant by humility. What did Jesus say? He said, unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains but a single grain. But if it dies, it produces many grains. For Jesus, his humility wasn't in things that made him look good. The humbling part about this event for Jesus was not the celebration that he received from everybody who was around him on that first of Palm Sundays, but the humbling part would be his complete and utter humiliation that was going to take place a few days later on the cross. It was going to be in his self-emptying of himself for others, for you and me. And Jesus went on to say that that is what he was going to be glorified in. The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. He's talking about the cross. And then he goes on to say, that's verse 23 of John 12. But in verses 25 and 26, he's going to say that this is the pattern that we as his followers will fall into too. This should be the pattern for what our humility looks like. Whoever loves his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life will keep it. If anyone serves me, he must follow me. And where I am, there my servant will be also. Where is he going to be? He's going to be on the cross. And then Jesus said, if anyone serves me, my Father will reward him. See, that's true humility. When we're following in that selfless way where we're not receiving things from other people. It's not something that makes us look good, but it's a self-emptying of self. And so I think about oftentimes when we try to be the man or the woman of the hour, okay, are we doing that in the way of true humility, or are we doing that in the way of vainglory? Are we looking to get glory from other people? Sometimes I think when we're being the man and woman of the hour, we're doing that in a way that's seeking appreciation or accolades for somebody else. We want some acknowledgement that what we've done has received recognition. So, I mean, just think about it in your home. When you go over and wash all the dishes, do you kind of wait to see if anybody in the house notices? When you send somebody a thoughtful gift, are you looking in the mail to see if you get the thank you in response? When you spend your time and long hours at work doing a project that nobody else is pouring their time into, and you put the extra effort in, you kind of hoping to get a tip of the hat from somebody for all that extra effort. And then once you get it, we kind of gesture in a nod of humility that hides all that vainglory behind the facade of Christian piety. Okay, not always, I know. I think we're actually doing things with true humility. And there are some times when we are actually selfless in what we're doing. But you know the easy way to tell the difference between when we are acting in that sort of humility and when we're not? It's when you do put in the extra time and extra effort for some sort of community event. And as a result of it, even though everything goes splendidly and just as you expected, and it's a huge success, when no one, not even a single person, gives any appreciation or says anything in thanks, are you still content in your humility to have served and accomplished what was set forward for you to accomplish? If so, then you're acting with a true Christ-like humility. But if after doing all that effort and nobody responds, you start to feel taken advantage of, or you start to feel slighted, or you start to feel a little bit upset, well then maybe we're running our humility in the way of this world instead of in the kind of humility that Christ displayed for us. Because think about Christ. When he was called to this be man of the hour and to experience this humility, was anybody there with him when he finished his work, when he accomplished the task. All these people who were waving their palms for him and singing to him and joining in the sing-along, were they going to be there after he died on the cross? Were they going to be there to take him down from the cross? His disciples weren't even there to take him down from the cross when he got to that point. Most of these people instead had become disappointed in Jesus rather than still celebrating Jesus at that point. Now, to be sure, the Father celebrated him. That was a part of the epistle lesson too. Philippians chapter 2, verse 9, and says the Father gave him the name that was above every name. And then certainly in verses 10 and 11, the Father's going to do more than that, but there's going to be a day in which every creature in heaven and earth and under the earth, and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord to the glory of God the Father. But that day hasn't yet come. And even though that day hasn't yet come, Jesus still considers that moment when he accomplished that work for us on the cross to be the moment of his greatest glory, even though nobody acknowledged it at the time. This is the sort of humility that is to be the pattern for our humility. And it's the kind of honor that it's become our namesake to seek. To seek that kind of selfless honor where we completely give up of ourselves for someone else. Are we ready to do that, to live selflessly for other people? And not expecting anything in return, but in true humility and in a gesture of true humility, being willing to do that without looking for anything. Jesus says, if anyone come after me, he will serve me. And whoever serves me will be with me where I am. Are we willing to be with Jesus in that place? Because it's really Jesus' turn to be man of the hour. Jesus said, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. It's Jesus' time to be the man of the hour. It's not the time for you and for me to be the man of the hour. No matter what we do to serve somebody else, all the glory goes to him. Now there's going to be a day, Jesus said, when he's going to come back. And when he does come back, the end of the age comes, and our time here is up, or our hour has come, as they say, and Jesus returns. We will get to share in his glory. And that's why Jesus said, whoever serves me, my Father will honor him. One day that honor is going to be for us. But are we content with Jesus to wait for that day and receive that honor when Jesus comes? May God grant to each one of us that Christian virtue of humility, that true humility. Now when this sermon is over, and when the service is over, at the end of the service I'm going to greet at one of the doors. And I think this week it's going to be at this door. I try to alternate that each week. So I'll be greeting over here at this door. And as I greet, you're going to walk through, and a number of you will say, thank you, Pastor, for the sermon. Thank you for this message. You'll mention something out of the sermon that was meaningful to you. And I'll respond with a nod and a gesture of humility. And thank you for it. But when the day comes, when I'm standing at the door greeting people, and you come through, and not one person out of everybody in here, not one person says anything kind about the sermon, or no thank yous, or doesn't mention anything that struck you that week in the sermon, I have to tell you, I'm going to be disappointed. And I'm going to begin to wonder whether I really accomplished the task that I set out to do. And I say that as a time of confession. Because you know this idea of vainglory? It's a sticky sin that sticks to us even when we think we're expressing humility. And I think it's probably true for you too. And which means all the more reason for us to be looking ahead to the message of Passion Week that's going to come this week and what Jesus is about to do as he goes to the cross. Because every one of us need to follow him. If we serve Jesus, we need to follow him where he is, because every one of us has sins we need to die to. Every one of us have trouble being that grain of seed that can fall to the ground and die. And every one of us needs that saving that the children's message was all about. Hosanna, save us now. And the only way that salvation comes, even from those sins, that sin of vainglory that still sticks in there so deep, comes through the forgiveness of Christ that happens in his humiliation on that cross. And so we pray, Hosanna, save us now. And Jesus, it's a scary prayer to pray, because as we're praying for you to save us, from that sin of vainglory. We know it's more than just offering us your forgiveness, but it means we're praying to you to humble us the same way you humbled yourself.